Welcome to everyone. You've already been welcome. I'm Pastor Nathan, and we're in the fourth of a series I call Relational Parenting. I've mentioned this before, but I want to mention it again. It's not just about parenting, but my increasingly strong conviction is that the things that we are learning from God in this series are foundational for living as a follower of Jesus, and living as a follower of Jesus is foundational for parenting. Many people think of parenting as being a very complex topic that you just have to have all the right information about, and we all enter that job of parenting without that information. And then we're trying to find out, like, who's got the answers? How do you do this? And I believe God's plan is much simpler than that. It is primarily who we are as people that is the dominant and primary influence on our children towards them becoming those kind of people, or at least having an opportunity to choose to become the kind of people that love God and want to follow Him with their life. In recent days, as you also know, I've been doing a lot of reading the last few years in the arena of brain science, and particularly the convergence of what they've discovered, the people that are discovering, learning, studying the brain, the human brain, in the last 25 years, since about 2000, and the convergence of those findings with what God tells us in His Word about who we are, who He is, and how to respond to Him. One of the things they've discovered, the Bible doesn't say this exactly or precisely this way, but it certainly points to this being true, is that our brains, which is another way of saying us, are fueled by only two things: joy or fear. One or the other, joy or fear. So today's message is basically what would it look like to be fueled by joy versus fear. If you're a parent, if you know someone who's a parent, the most powerful thing you can do for your children is to live increasingly fueled by joy versus being fueled by fear. But you don't have to be a parent for this to be powerfully impactful in your own life and also influential in the lives of the people that you have regular contact with. So as I was thinking about this message for this week, and I'm thinking about my life, I said, so what have I been fueled by? And I discovered that primarily over my life, I've been fueled by fear. And just a fast track lesson in brain science, your right system is nonverbal and relational, and it's kind of the funnel for joy. And your left system is verbal and problem solving, and it assumes whatever identity, which we talked about last week, that your right system tells it that your personhood believes that you are. And so if the message that you have identified yourself with is a fear message, then the left system will figure out how to solve the fear problem. And that's basically the orientation of your life. And if you're a parent, you can assume what that might do in the life of your children if they sense an environment or they live within an environment that is dominated by trying to solve problems, figure out best paths to avoid the worst possible case or whatever it might be. So for myself, I just remembered that I basically, out of an orientation of fear, and it doesn't mean you have to be just super scared about something, it just means you're basically seeing life as a problem to be solved rather than as a relationship to be enjoyed or relationships to be enjoyed. So my two approaches were survival mode or defensive mode, which are both fear-based. There's a third one, which I never learned how to do very well, which is attack mode, which is, attack the enemy, take them out of play, so then the problem's solved, and then you can go and make life the way you want it to be. All of these approaches assume that I can be God to myself and I can figure out for myself what the best approach to life is, which is essentially what the serpent is convincing Eve that she must do. Eat the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Then you'll be able to figure everything out, be able to survive any problem, defend yourself against any attack, or attack those who are attacking you, and take care of the problem that way. So, I've been in ministry for 40 years. And it didn't take me very long in ministry to figure out that there's a target on pastors and people in ministry. A criticism target, you could say, or I think you should be doing this versus whatever it is you're doing, kind of thing. I read one study years ago that a pastor in his church gave a survey to his 12 elders. He listed all the things that he could think of that people think pastors are supposed to do, and just asked them to fill out the survey and said, how much of my time each week do you think I should spend on each of these things? He got all their answers back and then cumulatively totaled the responses. So whichever the highest number was of item 1, that becomes the total, and the highest number for number 2, because they're not talking to each other and they don't know what each other thinks about this. Each of them has their own ideas about what it should be. So he totals it up, and it was well over 100 hours, I think close to 120 hours on a weekly basis, if you want to say, to keep all of his elders happy. And that's not just his congregation, that's just his elders. So one of my takeaways from that is, there's no way. You can never do that. That is insurmountable. So I went into defense mode, which is, well, I'll at least keep track of my hours so that when anyone criticizes me or anyone asks me about that, I could say, well, we don't think you're working hard enough, or we don't think you're doing enough of this, or we think you should do more of that. And then I could go back and say, well, last week I spent this many hours doing that and this many hours doing this, and that totaled, and at various times in my tracking of this, it was basically usually between 56 and 63 hours, give or take. And so then I would say, now, any reasonable person obviously wouldn't expect more than that, right? And so then in my mind, that was an effective defense. And then I got fired. You know what they didn't ask me? To see the list. They didn't say, let's see that. So it's like, we can think that we have the answer, the solution, the defense. When I was younger and basically went through some very difficult experiences, lived away from my family for 3 years with my brother, and often I would say felt kind of alone, like it's just us. We got to figure this thing out. And so in those times, I realized what I lived like was, I would just call it survival mode. Get through today, and then tomorrow, get through tomorrow. And then the next, it's like, I'll just say this, that's the opposite of joy. Survival mode and defense mode and attack mode are the opposite of joy. So, it's interesting that this is not a topic that if you just read a lot of things, Christian perspective, how to make life work, how-to books that Christians write, like how Christians can enjoy their life more. You don't read a lot about joy. So as I've been studying the brain science stuff, particularly from people who have converged, what does God say? What are they discovering? And are there any points of conflict, or are they just completely supporting one another, which is what they've been finding out. That there's a complete support of what God tells us about ourselves, about Him, and about how to live in what they're finding from brain science. And what it has done in me is it's encouraged me and kind of given me an impetus towards, should I just keep doing what I've always done, survival mode and defense mode? Or what would it look like to live more in joy. So I've been practicing those things. This morning's message is basically a combination of what God says about joy and what it might look like for each of us to live more joyfully. So, in case you didn't know it, God is joyful to be with us. God is joyful to be with us. He tells us he's joyful to be with us. You might have an image of God that's not that. It's more like he's got his rule book and he's keeping track and, he watches everything. So be careful. Jeannie and I have been walking quite a bit, and we gave ourselves permission, and this is actually a joyful choice to do, to not be governed so much by the schedule of, well, how much time should a pastor actually spend walking every week, and not be like walking too much. Or on the other hand, which I don't know if anyone will ask me this question, not getting enough exercise. Pastor, you should be walking more. You should be getting more exercise. But I gave myself permission not to worry about whether or not people were asking that question, and actually to pay attention to the people that we saw when we walked. And if one of them called out to us, we would stop and talk to them. Well, this past week we had 2 significant conversations with people that we just, in one sense, didn't really ever know until we started giving ourselves permission to do that. In one conversation, it was about a 2-hour conversation where we actually invited into the house in our, walking garb, and for about 2 hours, they shared their story with us. And as we left and we started walking again, I told Jeannie, I said, I bet we just heard more about their lives than their children know. And there was something joyful about being honored to be shared. They were vulnerably sharing their story with us. Another situation, we were walking by, a guy calls out and he goes, can't remember if he said reverend or pastor or whatever, but he doesn't know what to call me. So I want to pick your brain about something, he says. Okay. And basically what he was saying is, I get to the end of the day and I look back and I think of a couple of things I did that I'm not proud of. And he shared a couple of examples. And what do I do about that? And I just shared some of the stuff that we've been learning about joy. And one of the things is, God is not getting up there and saying, I'd love to be in your presence right now, but because of those 2 incidents you mentioned, I don't want to have anything to do with you right now. Get those things straightened out and we can hang out again. That is not, I said, that's not what God's like. And I just shared some of the things. And he was encouraged. And as we walked away, I said, even having this conversation was a joyful moment because we're encouraged to talk to you, you're encouraged to talk to us, and hopefully he's not going to be thinking, I would say that his image of God will be lessened in regards to him being a judgmental kind of, I'm going to make sure to make you pay for anything wrong that you do before we can have any relationship. That was kind of his view of God. So, in Numbers 24, the Lord spoke to Moses, Numbers 6, starting verse 22. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron, who is the high priest, and his sons, saying, Thus shall you bless the people of Israel. You shall say to them, and then he gives this blessing. And imagine this. This is something that he wants Aaron to remind the people of over and over and over and over again. Something that's true about God that he wants them to picture, as opposed to my friend who's thinking God has kind of got the score sheet and he's not happy with you right now, so you and God can't hang out because, what you did at the golf course earlier today. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you which literally, I believe, is a description of joy. So basically he's saying, imagine God's face being joyful to be in your presence. May that be the way you picture God, that when you and he are together, he's joyful. His face is shining, happy to be with you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Very close correlation between joy, love, and peace. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, and then it goes on from there. In Zephaniah, the prophet Zephaniah says, the Lord your God is in your midst, a mighty one who will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness. Rejoice over you with gladness. That doesn't sound like the guy with the score sheet keeping track of your mess up, does it? He will rejoice over you with gladness. It gets even better. He will quiet you by his love if there's something fearful or concerning. It's okay, I'm here, I'll take care of you, I'll get you through this. He will exult, or I think you could almost translate this word exult in some sort of a joy vernacular. He will joyfully, excitedly sing over you. It says exult over you with loud singing. So it's almost like, can you imagine someone so excited to be with you that they just start like singing? I mean, someone who can actually sing. What it reminded me of is the times when I don't sing very well at all. It's really difficult for me to hold the key, the tune. I mean, I know the words and I enjoy it, and I enjoy standing near someone who can sing because I imagine myself sounding like they do when they sing. But I used to sing to my girls, and I would make up songs. And one of the things they're finding in research on the human brain is the right hemisphere responds to poetry and singing in a way that the left hemisphere doesn't. And the right hemisphere usually doesn't respond to words, but it responds to words that are part of singing. And I used to, sit with my girls and make up songs, and they'd roll their eyes and stuff. So. But that was a joyful moment. Just some other ones, real quickly, just so you know how powerful it is. This image of God picturing us and picturing relationship with us in a joyful way versus a kind of a judgmental, condemning, trying to find out what we've done wrong and keeping track of that and making sure we don't get away with anything. Now, he definitely was concerned enough about that to send Jesus so that anything that is deserved by those who do things wrong is going to be taken care of. So Satan can never say at the end of all things and say, yeah, you let those people get away with stuff that no one had to pay. Yes, that was taken care of. But God's heart for us, even in the moments when we are sinning, messing up, doing something that doesn't please him, is not unjoyful. It is. He longs for us to be in tune with him and related to him joyfully. So Jesus says in his last words in the upper room to the disciples, these things, all these things I've said to you, I've spoken to you, that my joy might be in you and that your joy might be full. He actually wants his disciples and wants us to live joy-full lives. Lives full of joy. Survival mode, defense mode, attack mode is not a joy-filled way of living. He says in John 10, I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief, Satan, comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they might have life and have it abundantly, or you could say joyfully. Fruit of the Spirit, I mentioned that one. Romans 15:13. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you might abound in hope. That doesn't sound like survival mode, defensive mode, or attack mode to me. Nehemiah, and this is the book where the children of Israel are going back to the land after captivity. the walls are all broken down, and the people around him, like, they don't want him to have any strength or power, and so they don't want those walls to be rebuilt. They want to be able to keep them as a weak, defenseless people. And Nehemiah comes, and in 52 days they rebuild the walls. And in the middle of that story, you find this in chapter 8, verse 10. Do not be grieved. Do not be so concerned about a problem that seems unsolvable. Why? For the joy of the Lord is your strength. Now, in each case, they had to deal with all kinds of stuff. People in attack mode, people wanting to take Nehemiah out, discrediting him, attacking the job, sending letters back to Babylon to say, you know, these people are terrible, don't let them do this. And in every situation, as they trusted the Lord, as Nehemiah depended upon him, the job got done. John says in 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love. Again, closely associated with joy. Perfect love casts out fear. So you're going to have one or the other. And the best way to get rid of fear isn't to figure out the exact perfect solution to this problem. It's to increase your joy. It doesn't mean there aren't times when we have to solve problems, but even in those times we can do it with a sense of joyfulness versus like, oh no, if we don't figure this out, life as we know it will be over. And there's just kind of a panic fear component to that, or just a resignation, which my survival mode, which is basically just a resignation. There's no fix to this. We just have to get through it. And one of the things that does, one of the things that it did for me, and still is something that I'm, if you want to say, trusting God for by increasing joy, is to not revert to that now if things seem like uncertain, like a challenge or something. It's like, oh, there's no solution to this, just go into survival mode. And then this powerful verse is the last one that I'll share in this regard, just to say this joy thing is exactly what they're finding in brain science is exactly supported by, or what God said is supported by brain science would be a better way of saying it. That joy is a huge deal. And for parents, the most powerful thing that you can do for your kids is to increase your orientation to living joyfully and being fueled by joy versus being fueled by fear. 1 Peter chapter 1, beginning verse 8. So verse 6 uses the word joy too, but I'll just start with verse 8. In talking about our relationship with God through Jesus. Though you have not seen him, you love him. And this is speaking to people. Peter actually had seen Jesus, but the people he's writing to in 1 Peter had not seen Jesus. Though you have not seen him, you love him. Though you do not now see him, you believe in him and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory. One of the most powerful statements of joy in the scriptures is what Peter says here. And as I've looked into it, I think he's talking about living now joyfully. There's a sense of anticipation about what is waiting for us. So the hope that fuels joy is everything is going to be above and beyond anything we can imagine when everything gets finished at the end. And now we will have trouble, Jesus tells us. But here Peter is saying in the midst of that trouble, and he was getting ready within a matter of at least a year, I think, no more than a year from writing this epistle, he was crucified upside down and martyred for being a follower of Jesus. And then he says this, you believe in him and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory, obtaining the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. And when Peter uses the word salvation of your souls, he's not speaking of justification or you know for sure where you'll go when you die. It's an expression of the Christian life and what the result of that Christian life can be as we live it fueled by hope and dependent upon God and journeying through with his power anything that God brings to our path. So that's the first big chunk of the message. The second, not as big chunk, is that we can actually train our brains to be fueled by joy. So in Paul tells Timothy, train yourself for godliness, I think a component of that we could easily say is he wants Timothy to practice the kind of things that orient him towards joy, and the kinds of things we just looked at. This is what God is like. This is what you're like if you have a relationship with God. And if you live out of that, you're not going to be survival mode, defense mode, attack mode oriented as you journey through life. That's not going to be what you're like. So on our right system, there's 4 levels. And this level right here is the attachment level, and you could almost say the joy level. It is the deepest and most significant part of who we are, the most basic thing about us, and it's the level that when a baby is born, and some of the ways they've studied this is taking infants, wiring them up, and then putting them with their mother when the mother's happy to be with the kid. Oh, it's so good to see you here, son. Oh, aren't you cute today? And literally, the brain of this baby lights up when that happens. And the right system going from bottom to top is just like lighting up. If it was a Christmas tree or something, it would just be exploding with light, because that's what it's made for. And some of you might have heard things about attachment theory and things like that, which I'm not going to get into here. But basically, some of the problems that people run into is when that didn't happen to them in their early childhood, then they almost have to learn again, or learn for the first time from God who they are, because what they learned as a kid in their home isn't the correct message about who they are. Maybe they're just an irritation, an inconvenience, or a person that's always messing up and getting punished every time, and they don't even know what they did or why they, and they don't have the sense that they are deeply loved and people are just excited to be in their presence. But God is. So even it doesn't really matter what our story is. God wants our new story to be, He's excited to be in our presence. So at the bottom level, and then at the second level, and these are the only 2 that are operational when a baby's born, is the fight or flight, fear, thing. Is this good or is this bad? You could say that. As simple as that. Am I in a good and safe situation, or am I in a bad situation I have to protect myself against? I have to withdraw, I have to be quiet, which is, survival, defense, attack mode is that. Or is this a safe, good place where I can just freely be myself? If a person gets stuck there through various things that can happen to them, they have a very difficult time then not seeing everything through the lens of fear, anxiety, worst possible case, bad things could happen. And God is like inviting them into a secure, great, good relationship of love, the way we just described in those passages, and they're having trouble seeing it. So for parents, the best thing that we can do for our kids is to give them, they're not going to be perfect pictures, but in the ballpark, hopefully, of the kind of picture that I feel about you like I believe God feels about me. And so I'm reflecting to you what I believe God is giving to me. And I'm just kind of, giving you another dose of that same message. And as a child experiences that, it'll be much easier for them to orient to God as the kind of person that I just described. God designed our brains to be relational machines that run on joy. When our right system is operating in relational joy as God designed it to function, we will feel freedom and confidence to live out of our embraced identity. And as a child of God, that's an expanding awareness of who we are, all the things in Scriptures God tells us about ourselves. That as we mature, that gets bigger and bigger. But at the very foundational level, you could say the infant level of a follower of Jesus, it's got to be, I am dearly loved by God, and He likes being with me. Whatever bad things I think about myself, those are not coming from God. So every time a couple, a family, a church, a team are glad to be together, every time we withstand adversity together without going into, survival mode, defense mode, attack mode, each person's joy strength grows and their emotional capacity becomes greater. So the best thing we can do is to live out of joy and return to joy as quickly as possible. In fact, the people that are doing this convergence study where they know about the brain science and they know what the scripture says, their definition of maturity is people that can return to joy quickly. The more quickly you can return to joy, no matter what has happened to you, the more mature you are. So, how do we train our brains to be fueled on joy versus fear? Just real quick, three, I call them spiritual training exercises, but just an orientation and not a duty to fulfill. Not a good Christians do this, and if you don't, you're not a good Christian. That is not the idea of this. This is like, God loves being in my presence, and one of the ways I move into that and embrace it is by embracing the things that he says, and he's given them to us in a written form in his word, so I'm going to make that a special part of my life. So scriptures like the ones I just shared, and all the other stories and parts of scripture are teaching me how joyful it is. Teaching me. I'm actually experiencing this, is what I'm saying here. That it's actually a joyful thing to do. What used to be if you're discipling someone, like, well, you have to have a quiet time. Well, what is that? Well, let me tell you how to do it. And it becomes kind of this cerebral, intellectual thing instead of a relational thing. And I'm enjoying it more now as a relational thing. To be with God, to get to know him, and to start my day joyfully basking in my realization that he is joyful in being with me. I told you a story where, like, literally getting up and imagining Father, Son, and Spirit going, yay, Nathan's awake, we get to hang out. And then when I read my Bible, I'm not thinking, well, how long is this going to take? Let's set the timer, It's kind of like, no, we're hanging out. Secondly, I found that I experienced joy practicing having an ongoing conversation with God as I imagine him loving being with me. So we're just having a conversation. It helps me focus. This is not my journal, but I grabbed one from over there if you don't have one. It helps me to focus to actually do this. And I don't do it every day. I don't write in the journal every day. But there are times when it's like, I want to write that down. And there's something I'm going to get to later that I actually do in the back page of the journal. So I'm also learning that it brings joy to me and to others and to God when I share with others and I curiously listen to them when they share with me specific joy memories and walking with God relational journey story updates. Those men that are part of the men's group know that we start the men's group every time with, does anyone have, we added a joyful memory. I just added that in the last couple of weeks. But before it was just a journey story update. Just something that's going on in your life. God is teaching you. You saw something that you didn't see before. Prayer requests, we do that too. But part of it is we're relationally enjoying being with each other and sharing with each other the reality of our lives as we walk together with God. So, I'm going to share now 3 practices that I believe are significantly spiritual, but often could be viewed as just, like human-oriented things. And I've been practicing these things too, and have found them very joy-stimulating. So one of them is to remember joyful memories from your story. So as I'm reading the book, The Other Half of Church, which the elders are also reading right now, and one of the things that they say, or maybe it was the other one that he wrote, but one of the things they say is to one of the ways you can increase joy or practice joy is to actually practice remembering joyful parts of your story. And what you're doing is not only a time when you felt joy, but associating that with God. It was in God's goodness and kindness to me that this was able to be something I experienced, and it draws me and makes me feel closer to God and more like he wants to be in my presence and enjoys being in my presence. So it's joy inducing. So they suggest trying it for a month. 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the middle of the day, 5 minutes in the day. Get your list, and that's what I actually put in the back of my journal. So I'm up to 18 joy memories. I wanted to share 7 of those with you today, real quick. Can we get the first one up there? Okay, so on almost every Monday when I was a child of missionary parents on the island of Grenada, my parents, at the end of the school day during the school year, and then during the summer, on Mondays, I think my dad must have taken Monday off. I don't know that he literally ever took a full day off, but he would prioritize taking us to Grandance Beach. And you've heard the story before where I was training for the race. This is the beach I trained on, running that beach. So here's when we were kind of younger, and this is when I was, I think, going into 9th grade. So when I think back of my childhood, one of the joy memories is going to Grandance Beach with my brothers and sisters and hanging out, playing, and doing fun stuff. Another memory, which I'm not going to tell the race story, but was the experience that I told you about of having this race that I didn't know anything about, running in and doing terrible and coming in and like backing up the tables. And not liking how that felt and just kind of, saying, what do I have to do for this not to happen again? And then actually doing those things. And then having the experience of literally doing really well. What a little white boy doing so near the front. And so when I think back on that, I think, what a metaphor for who God sees us as versus how we tend to see ourselves, and what the difference is in terms of what happens. You don't even have any purpose or direction, you don't know what you're doing, you don't do it well, you feel bad about yourself, versus like, that was awesome. It was still a half marathon, and I was tired when I was done, but I felt awesome. I felt joy in doing something well. I told you a story about being invited to go out for soccer, never thinking I would have the experience of playing sports. So I told you Leon, this is the guy that invited me. I was behind him in the lunch line. My roommate, my senior year in college, John, and that's me. And there's us again, literally not too many years ago. So those relationships established in the context of sport were the enduring ones from my college days, not like who I sat next to in my major class, at 2 o'clock on Mondays and Wednesdays. I don't even remember who that was, but I remember these guys, and we still stay in some sort of contact. So when I'm picking guys for the Bill Knapp's team that I told you about, and like who are going to go there and work hard until we're done, and then we can enjoy fellowship, enjoy being together, they're working for free for me. Literally, they're like, I'm not paying them anything because it's like I need this money for gas money. I can't pay you guys. Will you work for me? Yeah, we'll do it for the joy of being together and having that meal together at the end of the time. So. Go to the next one, the stories of Jeannie. Joyful memories with Jeannie. So this is Jeannie when she was going into her senior year of high school. When I saw her then, and I literally had a girlfriend at the school I was at the time, but I literally said to myself, I would drop her in a second if Jeannie would like me. I mean, I was just like, she was the one. I didn't date anyone my whole senior year because she was there and she was dating someone else. Sorry to share those facts. And so I just thought, I'm not going to settle for second best, so it's like I'm not going to date anybody. And then our church had what you could call a revival, or a bunch of people turning to the Lord for a significant walk with God at the same time. And Jeannie responded during that time, and she turned her life over to the Lord again and said, I want to follow him. And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to do that too. And then we can get together. This will be great. And the next day when I was at work at the Kresge store, vacuuming up the a restaurant area there. I literally felt like the Lord was speaking to me almost audibly. Really? You're going to follow me to get the girl? That's what this is about? And I just was convicted, and I just remember saying, no, Lord, I want to follow you even if I can't get the girl. And literally the next time I saw Jeannie, she was like my sister. I mean, all those feelings went away. Until after I graduated from high school, this is her, like...
No, college.
College, excuse me, yes. After I graduated from college, so this is like 4+ years later in September. One day, like any other day, she's coming over, we're going to see a friend, and I'm literally under my car fixing something. I slide out from under my car, she's standing in the framed by the garage door opening, and it's like, all those feelings that I had back in high school came back. That's a joyful memory. There are so many details about us ending up getting together. Literally, there was a phone call when I was going into 8th grade, where we were going to go to school in Mount Carmel, Illinois. And all of a sudden, this guy's mom gets sick. There's a missionary house, a free missionary house available in Rides Junction, Michigan. Jeannie's great-grandpa, I think it was your great-grandpa, helped start that church. What are the chances, that I end up, randomly, you could say, why did he call my dad and not some other missionary that he knew? So anyhow, joyful memories of Jeannie. And joyful memories of our 2 daughters. This middle picture here, you see the 2 girls on that's way higher than my head. That's about 8 or 9 feet up. We lived on 17 South Weinbach in Evansville, Indiana. And the reason we were able to rent that house is because they were fixing to put a 6-lane crosstown freeway 1 lot over from where this house was. And the people who owned the house did not want to live there when a 6-lane freeway construction project was going on. And so they were happy to rent their house to us. And we lived through the 6-lane construction project. Part of it was they dumped a big old mountain of sand right in front of our house and blocked off the street. Literally, Weinbach Street, a 4-lane big street, is like a sandbox in front of our house for my 2 daughters and I. So that's a picture of them in my t-shirts enjoying the Weinbach Sandbox Mountain for a couple of weeks. They had and there's the house right there that it was right across from. When we moved to Evansville, they didn't show us this house for a week because they were sure no one would want to live in a house next to the crosstown freeway construction project. And literally every house we went to, it was like Jeannie's going, no, that's not it, that's not it, that's not it. Senior pastors get a little frustrated, like, well, what does it take, And they go, well, there is that one house on Weinbach. We could show them that one. Jeannie goes in and it's like, this is it. This is it. I mean, she just literally within seconds of walking in the house, she just knew that was the one. And we lived there for 7 years. The rent never went up once. The whole 7 years. We had joyful memories of what most people would have considered like, yeah, that's probably not up to standard, for people living there. So, and then guess what those 2 girls have produced for me? Joyful memories with grandsons. This summer, all 3 of these guys, with the snorkels and goggles I bought for them, from memories of Grand Anse Beach and Mondays, and fun snorkeling. If I'd gone back to those pictures, you'd see in those pictures a couple of goggles and snorkels, like in there. So this is something from my childhood that I am passing on to my grandsons. Now, what does this have to do with God? If I can imagine loving those guys, regardless of what they do, and I've thought to myself, what would they do that would cause me to go, yeah, I don't want you to come over anymore. We're done. You messed up too bad. I'm thinking, I can't think of anything. I can't imagine anything that would cause that to happen. And here I am, not perfect by any means. If I can imagine that with those guys, I can certainly imagine God thinking that way about me. So remembering things joyfully help us picture God thinking of us joyfully. And this last Christmas, these are the boxes that I made for them. He gets one. I kind of remember how I made it. I'm going to have one of them bring me the other one. So Harrison's going to get a box one of these days when he's old enough to appreciate it. But joyful memories with them. And then finally, you guys have heard about my Sermonator group. So this is on my joyful memories list on the back of my journal. Whenever I think of something, it's like, yeah, that was a joyful memory. And so 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the middle of the day, 5 minutes at the end of the day, I think about these and other ones on the list of 18. So that's just fun stuff. So I talked to Carlton yesterday. I told him, I said, hey, Carlton, I got your picture. I'm going to use it Sunday. And I said, it's that time when we're at the retreat and your daughter happened to be coming up to Grand Rapids for a wedding at the same time you were coming. She's from Tampa Bay. He's from San Diego. And it just so happened, no planning at all, that she and he are both in Grand Rapids at the same time. So she gets to come over and see Dad. Dad gets to see his granddaughter. And I thought, what a cool moment is that? So that's that right there. This guy is one of the top preaching professors that I had him in seminary, but Calvin, who started the group, invited him. We spent the whole 3-day retreat just getting to hang out with this guy and just talk about life and preaching and everything. What a great memory. This was a celebration event that we did together. Look at Jeff pulling Kevin's here. So, joyful memories. So, second and the last two before we close are real quick. We pay attention to gratitude and practice sharing it. So basically, anytime we think of something that we're grateful about, someone that's done something kind for us, a joyful memory that we've had, there's something joyful about sharing it with other people. It increases your joy, their joy, and I think God is pleased with it too. And then finally, with the first verse I said about let his face shine upon you, there's something about looking at someone's face, and in their eyes particularly, and letting them know you're glad to see them. So when we come here and we gather on Sundays or any other time you see each other, Thursday morning men's group, Thursday prayer group, young adult stuff, when we see each other again after not seeing each other, it's so good to see you. And let your face know that you're joyful about it. And they literally can feel it on their right hemisphere when that's happening. Even if they don't have words to describe what they're feeling, there's something about that that's very powerful. And I believe it's very godlike for us to do it. One of the things that I've intentionally started doing is every time those 4 grandsons and my 2 daughters come into our house, or we go to their house, or we see them again, I make sure to like look them in the face. Bryce, it's so good to see you. I'm so glad you came over today. It's so good to hang out with you. And we can gift each other that and live joyfully. So my hope for all of us is that we would be increasing our joy. And if you are here and you're a parent, or if you're on Facebook and you're a parent, my hope is that the more you can move towards joy in your personal life, the more that will impact your kids. Lord, thank you so much for the goodness, beauty, love, joy that you have that is characteristic of who you are. And may we more and more experience that for ourselves and live out of it as we journey through our lives for your glory. In your name we pray.